Happy to be joined here by Anna Riley. She is one of the 4 finalists for the position of the New Bedford Public Schools Superintendent position. Thanks a lot for joining us here today.
You're welcome. Excited to be here.
Well, obviously, you could stay in your position, right, over in Portsmouth, but you've decided to come down here to New Bedford and apply and be one of the finalists for the position here in New Bedford. Why do that? Why do you want to be the superintendent here in New Bedford when there are so many big challenges down here?
Well, I have to say that's part of the appeal for me. It would really be a dream job. I think I've learned a lot over my career as a teacher, principal, and now a central office administrator. I think I've collected the skills that would make me a good fit for New Bedford.
Well, a lot of teachers and a lot of principals have left over the last few years, and a lot of them have cited disagreements with the present administration. Some have said that the morale wasn't really that good, and there was a lot of disagreement on the approach. What about morale? How do you lead a system like New Bedford and get the educators kind of on your side and basically, in the same direction that you want to take the system?
Well, I think you kind of hit it. There are no sides. We're in this together. And I think that's what's really important is building those relationships. And I think that that's something that you can move ahead and you can make change, but you can't do that alone. And unless you really build a team and support and work together with the teachers in designing that change, it's not sustainable anyway. You really need to build those relationships and hear what the people who are in the classrooms and know the kids best feel is in the best interest of the school, and then work together to move that forward.
A few years ago, I had an educator tell me that, geez, if you don't have discipline, you really have a problem. Obviously, rules have to be followed. If kids are disrupting the class, then the other kids who are behaving, they don't have an opportunity to learn. And, in New Bedford, you have situations where sometimes the teachers have to deal with F-bombs and disrespect and that kind of thing. And a lot of the educators, they complain that the administration that's there now doesn't really back them. They're more interested in we got to keep the numbers down. We can't have too many suspensions. We can't have this and that. What about discipline? How important is that? What is your approach to a very difficult topic as discipline?
So, I was a middle school and high school teacher, and I taught at the alternative high school in Fall River. So I'm not a stranger to behavior in the classroom and what happens in classrooms. I think how we approach that together is really building a culture for students where we all feel respected. So it's not just the adults feeling respected, but kids really feel respected. And I think that can look different at different schools. So there are lots of methods out there that teachers can work from. So I know the schools here have started some work at middle school around positive behavior interventions and really focusing on the positive. We've done some work in Portsmouth on restorative justice practices, which really is about building relationships for teachers and kids to create a culture where everyone feels respected, because that in and of itself cuts down on discipline. But I think the other important piece to that is a teacher should never feel alone in those conversations, that we're there to support each other and to really build a culture for the school where we feel like we built it, not someone else told them this is how it should look and keep these numbers down and do this or that. But we decide what fits best for the school together, and then we work towards making sure that we create a culture we're all proud of. The kids are proud, the teachers are proud, and then we're all proud as a community.
Certainly getting to the root cause of some of those misbehaviors, Absolutely. That's certainly a piece of it, is it not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you have to really dig deep to look at what's happening, what's behind that. No student comes to school thinking, I'm going to misbehave today. I'm going to really, cause a ruckus in my classroom. Something's happened that's driven them to have that kind of response. So how do we really dig deep and figure out how can we support that student so they never feel like they come to that frustration point where they're going to act out in class, that together we can figure out, gee, I noticed that Johnny's not himself today. So I'm going to, take a few minutes to just check in with him one-on-one. And it looks different for different kids, but I think really looking at how we can support them on a deeper level so that it never gets to that misbehavior. I think that's really important.
Another subject that people seem to disagree on is testing. A lot of educators will say, we get too many tests, there's this kind of test, and then there's another test, and then next year they change it again. And the teachers say they don't even have time to actually get to the subject matter because they're so worried about the testing. I even heard a case where the questions on the test was stuff that was taught the next year, so they didn't even get to it. So it's like, how can they pass the test when we don't teach it till next year? So those kind of challenges. What about testing? Do you have a particular point of view on that?
I do think that, so we're not in control of the state testing. What the state testing is, it is. And so we have to kind of just get past that fact. So, all right, so it exists. So how are we going to make sure our students are prepared for that? And one of the things we can do that we can control is the testing that we select in the district. So what are we choosing? Is it consistent? Are we maintaining that focus year over year? Because if you change it every year, you're not collecting any valuable data anyway. So regardless of what happens on the outside, if we're collecting our own information on a regular basis throughout the school year, not just at the end when the kids are getting ready to leave the classroom, but we're collecting it throughout and we're looking at that consistently over time, that gives us good information. When you can look back 2 or 3 years for a student in the same assessment, that's when you can look at, are they growing? Are they improving? Are we really getting at the root cause of whatever this student needs help with? But I think in terms of the state testing, I think that piece of it we just have to own. It exists. How do we deal with it? How do we cope with it? And how do we make sure our students are successful on that test?
There have been times where New Bedford went out of the system to hire a superintendent. Maybe it went so well, maybe it didn't go so well. There have been times where they hired within the system and hired somebody that was from New Bedford and went up through the ranks. Is there advantage or disadvantage to being from inside the system or somebody that's come from the outside?
I think that's going to be a little bit of a mix. So every school committee, every community has their own personality, their vision, their view for what the school should be. And I think what's important for finding a new superintendent is that you find someone that aligns themselves to that vision. Because if my core values don't match the core values of the community, then we're not a match and we're not going to be successful together. So for me, that's the important piece. I wouldn't be applying for the job in New Bedford if I didn't think our core values were aligned. I believe in kids. I believe we can be successful, and I believe we can do that together. If I didn't, I wouldn't be here. But I think that's more important than whether a person comes from inside or outside. Now, I think having a connection to the community is important, and I love that about New Bedford. I mean, I'm Portuguese. My parents were immigrants, and I was the first in my family to be born here. And my mom's family all lived in Fall River. My dad's family all lived in New Bedford. So, you know, happy wife, happy life. So they they built their home in Fall River. So they made a home there. But I certainly spent lots of my time here visiting family in New Bedford and spending time here. So I think that some of those connections matter, but that just helps to make my connection closer to New Bedford. Not necessarily that it's advantageous to be in or out, but that we're aligned in our thinking and where we're going.
I know you're originally from Fall River, but
Yes.
you also spent a lot of time in Dartmouth, which is right next to New Bedford.
Yeah, so I worked in Dartmouth for 6 years, and we did have some projects that we did together. We did work on professional development across New Bedford and Dartmouth. We did, of course, we belong to a lot of the same regional groups, so that we've spent time together in meetings and in collaboration over what's coming next. The district assistance teams from the state work together with both Dartmouth and New Bedford, Fairhaven, Westport. So we've had those kind of crossovers, which is nice. So although I've been in Portsmouth for 4 years, I'm not sure how many folks are still here in New Bedford from my time in Dartmouth, but I saw some of the names on the list, and some of those folks are certainly still here. We did some leadership professional development together, and I'm happy to see some of those principals are still here in New Bedford.
Well, we have 4 candidates that are in the final, so to speak, the final 4, you know, like in the March Madness that comes down to the final 4. So the school committee has to make a decision with very good candidates in the final 4. Why do you think you're the best candidate out of the 4 to lead the New Bedford Public School System, do you think?
Well, I think my experience, having been a teacher in the classroom in Fall River, where I think the demographics are very similar to New Bedford, and then having experience both as a principal and as a central office person. I mean, I've been a superintendent for 7 years. I've learned a lot along the way. You know, I certainly have made mistakes over the last 7 years, but I'd like to think I've grown from them. And I think I've created really a path for myself that has allowed me to adapt and grow and change. And I think that I can bring that to New Bedford, and I think I can help continue to take New Bedford to new heights. And I'm excited about that prospect.
All right, Anna Riley, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule for stopping by Paul Santos Live. We wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you so much.